Training. In this section, we explore some of the preferred methods and procedures for training employees. Nearly all companies conduct a formal training program. Training provides employees with the knowledge and skills needed for performing a job. Training is the heart of a continuous effort designed to improve employee competency and organizational performance. A successful training period can instill the motives and strategies that a corporation values. Let's see how Wilson Learning, a company specializing in human performance improvement and training for 2,000 clients in more than 45 countries, approaches these theories in practice.
In my work with Wilson Learning and the clients that we deal with, there's a real broad spectrum of how long it takes to train an employee to be effective. Partly it depends on the job, and partly it depends on whether they've hired the person because of their skills and ability or because of their experience. If they don't come with the right experience, then training may take longer because they'll have to spend more time in the field working with others. If they have the experience, then it's more about what is the information that they have to learn about this company. And we see that in a lot of the companies we work with, where a company may have a program where it may be a year-long program for one level and it might be a month or two for a more junior level. The other thing is, it's clearly also a question of what is going to happen after they go through training. Who will help to reinforce what they've learned? And that becomes just as essential as the training itself. The kind of environments that organizations can provide to clients that are best suited to really the learning that they have to do is one where managers are very involved, that they set the stage of what the expectations are of the employee, and that the employee is clear about why the training is important. With that kind of support and the follow-up reinforcement of whatever they've learned, the organization gets payback on their training. Where I've seen it work really well is where a company really introduces that employee to the various senior leaders, has them introduced to various parts of the organization, go through the kind of training that will help them with their specific job. And in this particular instance, the organization actually assigned the individual a kind of a mentor to travel with them for a while if it was a sales job, or work with them if it was accounting, to actually see the job in action before they're expected to do the job themselves. And that's very effective. Our approach to training clients is very much all about behavioral change. And therefore, the training is based on the idea that there's a concept that we use called know, show, and do. First, you got to know the concept, so we have to have a facilitator who explains the concept. Then they have to show you what it looks like when you actually do whatever it is they're talking about. And lastly, you've got to try it out yourself. And in particular, there was one client where they said, we've spent a bunch of our budget money from last year. We've done all kinds of training. We're not seeing any results. And as we uncovered more about what they had done, what we discovered was that a lot of the training was lecture. A lot of the training was transfer of information. And that is the bare bones of what training is all about. And so with this client, it was a matter of really walking them through, here's the know part, which is the information sharing that they had done, but you're not going far enough. And what we did was we showed them how we will be giving examples and then engaging the employees in actually doing the work using these new skills, so that when they walk out, it's not the first time they'll be using them, it's the second or third or fourth time. The companies I work with, when it comes to looking at improving performance, oftentimes what they tend to focus on is the employee, the rank and file, or the mid-managers. And in my role, very often I'm engaging them in a conversation to say, let's move this up a notch, because senior leadership has a key role to play in not only saying what they're expecting of their employees, but to model the behaviors. So the expectation needs to be raised up that leaders need to understand what it is they're asking employees to do and be able to do it just as well.
In this segment, Maxine Races says the main emphasis Wilson Learning provides to clients is very much all about behavioral change, and is therefore based on the concept they call know, show, and do. Wilson Learning found that a lot of training clients do is based on a lecture, which only takes care of the transfer of information or the know part of the ideal training process. Based on what you saw in this segment and read in the chapter, how does Wilson Learning's know, show, do approach fit the training process in the chapter described? What specific training in the chapter would you use to actually implement a know, show, do training approach?
We do some work in preparing employees to work in teams in two ways. One is that, as you know, so many organizations have virtual teams. And so we have a core course that's called High Performing Virtual Teams, and we actually deliver it virtually. And we talk about things like communication style and needs in the particular job, and sometimes global implications around how people operate in different regions. So I think it's really helping employees to understand the differences and the strengths of having a diverse group of people. Even if they're all from one country, we have different needs. Some of us are more analytical. Some of us are much more creative and expressive. Some really want to get to the point and get the job done quickly. Some need to really take time and process. And actually, it strengthens a team to have all those styles. So we help employees to understand that those different styles can actually be a strength if you understand and can appreciate and leverage those differences in the way you work with each other. There's an example of how we've done virtual coaching with directors of sales for one organization that was really interesting. They came from across the country onto a virtual webcast that was to focus on helping them to be better coaches with their sales teams around some negotiation skills that we had taught them. And when we first started doing this, of course, we had our facilitator who was going to lead the process, but we needed one of these directors, each of these calls, to take real leadership around focusing on their particular situation and an account that they wanted to help someone improve the way they negotiated, and use the forum of a virtual web conference to have their colleagues help them come up with better ways to actually negotiate. And so by doing that, we were able to focus the application of their coaching skills on a particular individual, but have everybody else be involved. Over the years, technology has impacted our work tremendously out in the field, because what we're finding is, number one, there are more and more organizations with virtual employees, just as I am. Therefore, it costs a great deal to fly everyone in to do a training live. So more and more we're doing what we call virtual training. That is, we're using webcasts, but we have a live facilitator and everyone is participating, and we use all kinds of technology, including things like chat rooms and whiteboards and so on. We also do a lot of work around creating simulations where, in fact, the group may have gone to the course, and now they're getting back together in almost like a boot camp environment to say, we're going to put you through a day in the life, and you're going to use all the negotiation skills that you learned in a scenario that we've built as a case study. And we're finding organizations really like that, because it's no longer just a workshop, it's an application-oriented experience that helps them really see where people are in terms of their learning and let them apply all those skills in a real work-related situation. So training itself, you can measure whether people are happy. That's usually things like, was the lunch good and the room, well air-conditioned? But the real impact is what happens back in the job. So we work with the client to determine what are the criteria that you're looking to measure to be able to say this training made a difference. And so we're very clear about defining what those measures are at the front end, ideally before the training, and then come back months later to actually look again and inspect whether it's reports or testimonials from employees and managers. And that, in my estimation, many people in training are not thinking this way, and it's a direction that they need to take, that we actually encourage them to take, because HR at the end of the day is measured by their impact on the business. And if they are not being measured that way, or they're not thinking that way, they can easily be seen as an expense and not a benefit to the organization. Let me give you an example from an insurance client that I worked with a couple of years ago who had a call center. And what we were doing was helping these call center customer service reps be trained to handle, especially where they had people that were irate or very unhappy with the situation and they were calling to complain and look for a resolution. We came back after the training and asked each of the customer service reps to use a little table that we had created with them to document their calls for a period of that particular week after the training. And so the customer service reps documented what the situations were, and they also documented the value of those policies. And by the end of that week, when we tabulated all the results, the company was quite delighted to find out they had actually saved $1 million plus in business that would have been lost had those irate customers said, I'm not happy, I'm going. That's it. I'm going somewhere else. And so that was a true documentation of a situation that those customer service reps improved the revenue and maintained the business for their organization based on having done that training. Training can be a really terrific contributor to productivity if it's related to what people are concerned about, what their job is all about, if there's a direct application following the training. If training is out of context, if it's not related to what people are responsible for, it's kind of nice to know. It basically is taking them out of their job and away from the field for a couple of days. And in that case, organizations don't see it as valuable. So the real question around productivity and its relationship to training is, why are we doing this? How is it related to the business drivers that are causing us to be successful? And how do I link it to the people's jobs so that they're leaving that training knowing that it's going to contribute toward their ability to do the job well?
In this segment, Maxine explains how technology has impacted her company and how more training is done virtually, often with the use of simulations. In terms of measuring training effectiveness, you typically measure whether people were happy with the training. However, she says the real impact is what happens back on the job. It's important to pick the right training evaluation criteria. In one case, after training, they asked customer service reps to document their calls and proved how effective the training was in retaining customers. Based on what you saw in this segment and read in the chapter, what do you think of the experimental design Wilson Learning used to assess the call center training program? How would you suggest they improve it? Discuss 4 types of technologies Wilson Learning could use to deliver training. Now take a moment to consider the following hypothetical situation. As a human resources representative, how would you approach the following?
So let's assume management comes to you with a request for training, and now they follow up with you and they say, so by the way, how am I going to know this is successful? The question for you to think about is, what are the measures of success that you can look at, let's say 3 to 6 months down the road, and think about different kinds of training. It could be, again, it could be administrative training, it could be customer service, it could be sales, could be leadership training. What are the quantitative and qualitative measures that will tell you that that training had an impact 3 to 6 months down the road?